Is Donald Trump actually instituting the martial law that we were warned Barack Obama was actually going to institute? If you were paying attention to politics during the Barack Obama administration, you might remember the unhinged, belligerent fear mongering from the right that Barack Obama plans to enact martial law in the United States. Some versions of the conspiracy said that it was part of a plan to enslave people in FEMA camps. Sometimes RFID chips were involved, sometimes not. And all of this was part of Obama's bigger plan to suspend the 2012 election, which he didn't do. And then it was actually about suspending the 2016 election and remaining in power indefinitely while bringing authoritarian militaristic terror to the streets of America against the wishes of state and local authorities and elected officials. And if you were paying attention, you knew that Barack Obama had no interest in doing any such thing. There was no chance whatsoever that that was what Barack Obama was going to do. But that gets us to today. And we actually have to have a discussion today about whether Donald Trump is indeed instituting martial law by the forceful deployment of paramilitaries to cities around the country, where if you look at Portland, for example, those troops have tear gassed the mayor of Portland, more on that later, attacked reporters and journalists. And so the first step is, what is martial law? If we don't know what it is, it's hard to determine whether we are seeing it. Well, martial law is when normal civil functions and civil law are replaced by military control. Sometimes martial law can be declared during a real or fabricated emergency situation as a lead up to or after a coup in the context of a natural disaster or states of emergency. And there's some other situations as well. And often martial law includes any or all of the following: the military in the streets working as local law enforcement, curfews, the suspension of habeas corpus and normal due process, military law and justice being applied to civilians. So do we have literal martial law today in the United States? No, we don't. Is what Donald Trump has done so far literal fascism? It's not. But we are seeing what the early phases of potentially future widespread martial law could look like if slowly deployed. Now, if you deny this basic fact, you're denying reality right now. It's not all happening at once. It's not completely obvious unless you look step by step. But that's what makes it harder to see. And in fact, authoritarian dictators understand this, and they often deploy martial law in baby steps. Now, again, to be completely clear, I am not saying we will soon have a fully authoritarian police state martial law situation in the United States. And part of the reason we may not is Trump will run out of time. He will either win re-election and no longer need these authoritarian escalations to try to help himself get reelected, or he will lose. And as far as I'm concerned, he will leave office, and thus it will stop the escalation as well. But think through the steps. Donald Trump is deploying federal troops, armed paramilitaries to cities and towns. These troops aren't part of the normal military branches. They're part of Homeland Security, but they really are a military that is functioning at the pleasure of the president as local law enforcement, overriding local law enforcement, camouflaged with body armor, carrying heavy weapons, throwing people into unmarked vans. Even local politicians and reporters are getting hit. Now, many of them are being released after being thrown into a van and brought to who knows where. And it's true that when you look at some of the worst police states and martial law situations of the last 40, 50 years around the world, many of them don't release people without charges. If it turns out they don't want to charge you, sometimes they bring you into a dark room and they kill you. And you never hear from them again. You are never heard from again. And this happened to friends of my parents in the 1970s during the military dictatorship in Argentina. That's not where we are, and we're not actually close to that right now. But at least colloquially, they are replacing civil law with troops, federal troops, quite literally. If mayors and governors don't want them there, they are in conflict with local law enforcement. They are enforcing a sort of federal military law and putting it above, supreme to, local law enforcement. Now, the typical justification is being given. This also fits with history, which is that it's an emergency. Now, this gets us into interesting territory. The incredible thing is that we have real emergencies right now. We have an emergency, which is the pandemic and the mishandling of the pandemic by the federal government, meaning the Trump administration. We have another emergency, which is the economic crisis happening, which is far worse than it had to be as a result of Donald Trump's mishandling of the pandemic. But that's not the emergency that Donald Trump is actually pointing to justify these troops in Portland and Chicago and other places soon. Trump is saying the emergency is out of control, cancel culture protesters destroying statues and federal property and trying to burn courthouses to the ground. That's not the real emergency. In fact, that's not even actually happening as described. The emergency is 1,000 or more people per day, again, dying of coronavirus, 11% unemployment, the pending eviction crisis, cuts to the unemployment insurance benefits and the like. That's the emergency, but that's not why Trump says he's sending in the troops. So now they start bolstering this environment of fear and panic as a result of the federal troops being there. And people are starting to wonder, how long are we going to live like this? Are we going to be able to vote normally in November? Are these troops going to be intimidating me at the voting booth in November by patrolling with heavy weapons? And this is quite literally the way it's done. This is out of the playbook, slowly creeping in to where we start thinking, well, it's normal to have the armed paramilitaries in cities across the country, but this next thing isn't yet normal. But then you get the next thing. And okay, now that's normal. But the next thing isn't yet normal. It's the slow normalization. Now they have the benefit that there are some people already on the side of the paramilitaries. That's another issue. And we'll talk about that probably not today, but maybe later in the week. So if you're waiting for one day at which we confirm today at 12:15 p.m., we have now reached martial law or something like that. By design, that's not how it happens. It started with years ago, Trump joking about maybe I'll stay in power. I like the idea of how China now allows the president to be reelected indefinitely. Trump attacking the free press, kicking out, early on, I think it was Jim Acosta from the White House briefings momentarily. And, it starts with that, attacks on the press, et cetera. That became normalized. Trump attacks the press all the time now, barely gets attention. Well, then now there's troops in Portland and soon in Chicago and other cities next. And some people are already fine with it because they believe Donald Trump's explanation for why we need the troops to be there in the first place. And then before you know it, we have a national emergency with paramilitaries deployed nationwide, regularly repressing not just peaceful protesters with flowers and signs, but even attacking journalists and members of the press, covering what's going on, which we are already seeing and could potentially increase. And then you've got Trump's federal troops on election day presiding over an election in which Trump himself is trying to get himself reelected. If you thought Secretary of State Brian Kemp in Florida running the election in which he was a candidate for governor was bad, then think about Trump deploying paramilitaries to supervise his own reelection campaign. This is how it creeps in. And I hope people are starting to see it and realizing how important it is to put a stop to this and, put a stop to it. We may not be able to stop the deployment of the troops, but by not taking our eye off the ball, this is a desperate, cornered president who sees the polls and knows as of today that he's losing, and he could be embarrassed in a historic electoral college rout by Joe Biden if things don't change, right? That's the whole point. He is now extremely desperate, and that's very dangerous. And so we need to make sure that at the top level, this is not allowed to change the character of the November election. In 5 weeks, there are certain states that can start early voting absentee. Do it. Do not be dissuaded. Keep your eye on the ball because we've only got 3 months to go. We know the plan. We know the slow creeping of authoritarianism. We're seeing it right now. We've been hearing about it from people like Timothy Snyder and others for a long time. This is it. This is no longer rehearsal. We've got 3 months. And this is the game plan, and we're starting to see the signs. We're going to continue covering this on the David Pakman Show Instagram page, which I invite you to follow, @David Pakman Show. While you're there, follow me on Instagram at david.pakman for a break from the authoritarianism, non-politics, non-political stuff on my Instagram page. We'll take a quick break. I do want to talk about the latest Senate predictions, and so much happened over the weekend to catch you up on.